Hello everybody and welcome to part 2, the base color portion of this tutorial. We're going to be going over base color and the details that you see here. For example, we have our brick, we have our mortar, and we have our lichen. We also have a snow variant, so we'll be doing snow, kind of like you can see it accumulating here at the top and falling down. And we'll also have our wet version. It's kind of hard to tell because it's wet, but there are like drips and there is changing the color, especially like under the bricks. And we'll be doing that in this part. So let's hop right into it. Okay, so this is where we left off in part 1B. Part 1B, yeah, of height. We set up this quick little basic test color setup here where we have our uniform color for the bricks, and then this is where we use the mask from our mortar, and then here we have our mask for lichen, and then we just do basically a slightly darker version or darker gray for that. So these are basically like our main 3 masks, and then the other ones that I talked about, like the snow, we'll be adding those as we go. But we're gonna unplug that for now and just plug in our main path. And I've already disabled everything, so this is the start. But actually, before we get started, I want to talk about this node that I learned about, and just kind of talk to you about what it does and why it's helpful. So this is called a PBR, base color and metallic validate node. So I think if you type in PBR, I think it's this one. No, not that. Sorry, I'm blind. It's this one. Type in PBR and it's this one with like the half sphere. And basically what this does is it validates, or it tells you if your base color or your metallic, and I think you can change here, and you can do metal and albedo, which is base color, or combined, but I just use it for albedo because there's no metal in this texture. So next time we do a metal, I'm going to be using this and we'll look at it. But basically what it does is you feed in your final color, or your final whatever goes into your base color input here. So if we were to plug, well, we already have it plugged in here, but we'll do it over here as well. So if you plug that in, basically you want this to look green, and if it looks red, that means it's not good. So for example, let's change this lichen color all the way down to 0, and then if we double click this validate, it'll show up as red. And if we go back to that same color and we just slowly slide up the I think V specific for value, but basically brightness. So if we keep going up slowly, you can see that it turns into yellow, just like a traffic light, and then it makes its way back down orange, then red, and then the other way around towards green. And basically what that's telling you is that it's within the acceptable range of an albedo texture or map. So if we look over here, you can do 2 thresholds, 30 and 50. And if we, to explain what that 30 and 50 means, if we change this to, is it float? Yeah, so if you change this to, if you have it look like this, I always have a hard time telling whether it's turned on or off, but I think this means it's on. So if you turn float on, so the 30 means that this should be green, I think. Yeah. So basically anything below 30, so if we go to 29, it'll start changing. Well, it's hard to tell because it's only one number down, but if we go to like 25, it starts to turn to yellow. And then obviously the further down you go. So that's 30. Now the 30 also applies on the opposite end. So you want to be minus 30, quick maths, that should be good. And then if you start going over, it starts to turn red. So yeah, so this basically validates, the albedo range, and you want it to be within those values because realistically, there's nothing, even like snow, which we think is like the whitest substance, is not this bright. There's actually a chart or values, which I think is like 0.9. So like, if we turn this back off, like you wouldn't want to go past 0.9 for white, or for snow, I mean. Which makes sense because it's still good here. Now, for some other reasons, you might want to do 50, but we're just going with 30 here. Okay. So, let's plug this over here. Now, I've already disabled everything, so it's all ready for us. And let's get started. Okay. So first, we're going to start with our portal with our final normal, which is this guy here, which then ends up plugging up to the normalize. You want to do this before the normalize? So if we go back, we're going to be starting with these three guys. So first, we'll do a facing normal node. We'll do a light. And you can see the values here. You can just set these up. Nothing for this guy. So we have light, and then here we have another light. Now this light is facing from the opposite way. So if you can see here, it's kind of casting a shadow. So it's like a light source hitting from the top down. And then over here, it's hitting from the bottom up. Now there's another node that's similar to this. It's called, I think I use a later. Just to show you real quick. It's called Shadows. It does a similar thing to this, but it casts shadowing. So you only see the shadowing and not like the way it is here. And I'll show you an example of that as we go on, because we use that for the dripping effect. Okay, so now that we have these guys set up, we're going to make masks or portals for each of these. So we have mask facing normal, mask light up, which is just the light facing at the top here, so it's on the upside of our height, and then light down is light at the bottom, or down at the downside, downward. All right, so once we have these three set up, next thing we do is this guy here, which is just a copy of these two. Set to 0.7, which is just mixing these two just to get some variation. And obviously, since this is a brick wall, the bottom of the bricks are always going to be just a little bit darker, because that's where like dirt and stuff accumulates from rain. And just overall, it's going to be usually hit by shadowing unless you aim a flashlight at it from the bottom. So once we have this guy, we're going to do another copy set to 0.5. And we're going to use our final height portal or mask. And that is from right here. So the last input before everything else. Okay. Then from there, we are going to plug that into a gradient. Now, I know this can be frustrating. I usually get kind of annoyed in tutorials when they have this, but it's sometimes really just the way it's done. But for you guys, what you can do is pause the video when I click on this. Use the snipping tool to snip this area. So here, I'll show you how to do that. So I've gone ahead and I've used my snipping tool to snip this right here. Or you can pause the video and then go to the gradient map. Actually, let me bring this, put it on my other screen. And then I'm going to go here, pick gradient, and then I'm going to just run it across the picture I took, the snip. And then it should give you a pretty close match. So I just hit pick gradient and I ran across. Just be careful you don't accidentally hit the markers because they're black, and you'll capture black in your gradient. So just slowly make it bigger if you have to, and then just run across, and it'll give you a pretty good replication. So if we were to plug these in, they're not the same, but. And what you could also do is, like, for example, in here, you see that it's darker here. You can just move that guy, maybe move that over there. It doesn't have to be 1-to-1, but you want to get, like, similar, just color scheme overall. Unless you want to take the time to click all these, which they're pretty tiny, so that might be difficult. But anyways, once we have our gradient map here, I'm going to turn that on. So here we have an HSL, and then we have another one up here, which is just a way darker version than this one, and then this one is just a little bit tuned. Just want to take a quick moment to show you guys this. This is basically my references that I used, and for color I mainly used this one here. Well, mainly it was this guy here, but I used a little bit of this guy here, but like 95% this guy. So if you want to just snip this, and then you can just, you know, run your gradient selector thingy through these guys. But this is kind of the color scheme that I was trying to go for. Alright, so let's move that guy out of the way. Alright. Okay, so then we have these two versions here. And basically what we're doing here is adding some darkening spots to our bricks. Right now we're just worried about bricks right now. Okay. Okay, so we just need this guy, the opacity. You know, how are we determining what to put this on, the darker version? And for that, we have our AO brick only portal here, feeding into a histogram scan. And then from there, that goes into this blend here, set to multiply, 0.625. And then we're using our noise white noise. Oh, I guess that should be called. Well, I have to rename it down there, but that should just be noise white fast. But this guy. And then we're going to scan it. And then I use that to multiply. To kind of break it up, to give it that grainy rock look. Okay. And then we feed that into the opacity. And then we get this. Okay. After that, we have this, what I call brick second base color. So this is our initial base color. And then we have another one that we use on some of the other bricks. So to do that, we take this guy again that we used back here. And then we just split him up here. And then we go into another gradient map. And again, you can just run your cursor across. It might be better if I do that for you guys. So run that across there, and I think for that I used like this color over here. These like more orange looking colors. If you want to get your own. Okay, that feeds into the foreground. It's just a copy set to 1. And then here we have our final AO, which is a mix of both the mortar and the bricks, which should probably just be the brick, honestly. Let's try that. Let's go to brick only. Actually, I'm gonna stick to the tutorial. Because then I have to like change some things and change the scan. And let's not go into all that. So yeah, just take the final AO, scan it, feed it into a multiply blend, and then we're gonna take our grayscale distance, our grayscale random distance, so it's pushed out all the way, and then we're just gonna scan it, multiply it into here, and that's gonna be our opacity. So we're not coloring all the bricks this color. We're just doing these guys, and then even these guys, only some of them are getting it more than others. So the white ones are going to be more of this color, and then these gray ones are going to be less of that color, but be a mix. So we're getting a lot of variety there. I wonder what it looks like if we swap these around. Well, it's about the same, just inverted. All right. Actually, what happens if we do this? It's actually a pretty nice color too. All right. So once we have that, we're gonna move over here to the third base color. So just to get more variety in there, we're gonna take from that same road from earlier here into another gradient map. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Then that feeds into an HSL. I just make it a little bit more red. Then I blur it a very tiny bit with a blur HQ color. That goes into the foreground. And then I take that same node or portal that I used here, use it again over here. I used a shift, just because why not, into a scan. Because again, I don't want this happening to all the bricks, just some of them. And then the ones that are selected vary in degrees. Take our noise moisture 1. Looks like that. And then I just multiply it just to kind of break it up. And then we get this. Now this is our brick surface dark spots. So we add some spotting, basically. So we take this node just to get some fancy noises in here. We get grunge, rust, fine. We do the gradient trick, which means we just take the final marker here and we just turn down the red and the blue to 0 and keep green up to 255, which allows us to use this normal to high quality, which gives us a different kind of noise from this, just to get more noise out of your noises. And then we increase the tiling on this guy. And I think I also rotate it 90 degrees. Then we scan it, and then we add sub it by 0.35 with this guy down here, which is clouds 1. Scan the clouds 1. You can copy paste this gradient down here and this normal to high quality. Then we scan it as well. And then we take those two and we add sub it to get this. Then I used our random color distanced version of our bricks to break it up, because I don't want it to run from one brick to another. Into a multiply blend here. And I use the mask facing normal, which is this guy that we made earlier, that we used for this guy. Where am I? Over here. I use that guy to multiply it on top so that we can get some of that detail back in, because we don't want this to just kind of go uniformly across the bricks. We want to break it up. And we're using this to exclude these areas here. Then that goes into a multiply set to 0.5, and we use a grunge map 001 We turn down the balance a little bit, and then we use that to break up this guy. And then that goes into the opacity. And then from the mask facing normal, we do another gradient. You can just run it across that. And then here we darken it by a good amount. Feed that into the foreground. And then we get... Probably could have done this in a more simple way, but it is what it is. The more breakup, the more detail, the better it'll look. Alright, so after that, we go into what I call brick color spotting. So let's just see what it's doing here. So we want to avoid this getting too dark, so we want to add some brighter spotting on top. So let's start with, we just connect this into the next blend. Let's start with the color. So we'll take a Grunge Galvanic Large. We'll increase the tiling here as usual. And then we'll blur it. 2.12. And then we're going to subtract this top from it, which is a Grunge Rough 30. I like this one, or I chose this one because it has like this grainy look. And since I'm working with stone, I wanted to have that. And then here I rotated 90 degrees and increase the tiling. Then I auto level it, and then we just subtract. So then we get this noise, but now it becomes noisy because we subtract this from it. Then we do another gradient map here. This is a pretty simple one. Then we do an HSL where we just brighten it up a bit. Then that goes into the foreground. And then for the opacity, we take our final AO. We scan it into a subtraction blend. We take the Grunge Rough 30. Then we auto levels it, get the full range. Gives us this. Then here, obviously, we don't want that much on everything because then we kind of just lose all the detail we just worked on. So we need to break this up. We'll take a Noise Clouds 2 or Clouds 2 noise. We'll increase the tiling. Then I scan it. Now this is the breakup. So if you want more breakup, you would reduce the position here. Then we multiply that, so then we get rid of some of it. And then we auto level it here. And then we get our brighter spots. Then we have our brick color staining, which is a little bit more dramatic, but it's okay because we're going to end up like blending it all back together. So for that, we're using that mask facing normal again from earlier, from the very start, into another gradient. Then just feed that into the foreground, and then here we have a Grunge Map 008 and a Clouds 2. I should have turned this into the Portal version, but it's alright. We slope blur it a little bit, and we got these little details. Then we vector warp it by the random color distanced version. And then here we multiply by 0.42 with the random grayscale distanced version. Then we scan it by 0.3. Then we break it up using a black and white spots 2. We increase the tiling on that. Then we multiply by 0.75 into a scan to get those brighter spots or staining. Then we have our brick surface bright spots. You can see the difference there. We take a black and white spots 3, transform 2D, increase the tiling, gradient map. I think the longer I make it, the harder it is for you guys to keep it straight, but it also makes it easier for your gradient to pick up all the different colors than being like this. Then we have an HSL, where we just darken it a bit, feed that into the foreground, and then we need to do our opacity. So we take the file AO again, we break it up with the multiply using the black and white spots 1. Set the scale to 3. Then we scan that, multiply it together, and then here we do max lighten, and we take the grunge rust fine. And then we offset it a little bit, and we increase the tiling, and then we kind of move it off to the top left there. Then we do our vector warp grayscale. We do this, always do this at the end. You don't want to do the vector warp and then rotate it, because it's going to throw off the brick locations. And then we obviously use our distance color. And like I said, we do the max light in there. And then we do our bright spots. Then I just do an overall brightening of our color. So just make a HSL and do 0.525. Now here we do brick color variation. Now there are many ways you could do this, or several configurations, I guess. So I'll just go over this quickly. So this first one is literally just making some of them darker and some of them brighter. We're doing a multiply here, set to 0.25, and it's just, these guys are just going to be darker. So if we look at here, it just becomes darker. Now this one does the same thing where it becomes darker, but it kind of gives us a little bit of a tint or a hue, which is, I think this is the one I did. And then I have this other one because I was going to do a moss, like a mossy version with the wet, but I was getting tired of this material. Well, not tired of it, but it was starting to get a little too crazy, as you can already tell. And it wasn't part of the plan, so I didn't want to just force it in there. But you could do this to kind of have different variations. So like for snow, you might want this one. And it just makes them a little bit more desaturated because it's covered in snow and it leaves like a white coat on it. But I went with this one. But basically, this is the gradient for it. You don't even really need this if you didn't want. But, you know, that's the idea behind this step at least. And then this is just a black to white. And then you can see this one has some green in here. And the higher and then this HSL here for this guy. And the higher this value is, the more of that color you're going to get. But you're also going to lose some of the detail. So like if I went with this green one here. And then increase that. You can tell some of them are actually looking way different than others. So you want to make it subtle. See, this one has like a green kind of like coat on it. But we're going to go with this guy here. Then we have our brick crevice coloring. So this is where we kind of bring back some of the depth to our brick. Because we're using the ambient occlusion again, and we're going to be coloring those areas there. So we have our grunge concrete. We blur it a little bit. Then we do a transform. We increase the tiling into a gradient map, into a default HSL, just in case you want to tune it. Then we take our AO brick only. We invert it. Because now we want to color the pits basically. We scan it, and then use that. So then you can see that like our spots or like our like sponge holes from the height are getting colored in. And you can, you know, scan it more or less here if you want to get more or less of that. Then we have here our, we lost some of our color here, and it's kind of become all pretty much dark. So here we start adding some highlights. So you can see what a difference that makes. So to do that, we do AO brick only. We scan it, so then you can see here that we're getting the high points of the height map. We change this from grayscale to color by just plugging it into a gradient map. Feed that into the foreground. Then we take our random grayscale distanced. So this guy, we use a histogram select to just kind of get a different variation than this. And then we use a range here to tighten up or decrease the range of our grayscale. So kind of like the opposite of an auto level. An auto level unlocks the entire range. This node lowers the range. So if you lower this, they all start kind of blending into each other. You're squishing the range of the grayscale. So then that feeds into the opacity, and then we get this. Then here we have our second brick highlight. Now, these are both very subtle, but you can tune it to your liking. But I didn't want it to be too exaggerated. So like if we change this all the way up, like that's way too much. You want it to kind of be subtle. And these are both add linear dodges. So for this one, we're going to do the opacity first. Again, random grayscale distanced. Select. Range. Same concept as back here. Then we have our normal detailed bricks mask. So if we double click this, this is coming from here, which is after the micro surface details that we added to the normal map only. We're pulling this guy because we're working with just a brick. Then that plugs into a curvature smooth. And in this version of Substance Designer, curvature smooth has different outputs. One's for curvature, convexity, and concavity. So even though I didn't use these, I gave them portals just in case I did, because at the time I didn't know I was not gonna use them. So we're going to take convex because obviously it's the points facing outward of our height. And then I scan it to tighten it up. Again, just turn it into a color by plugging it into a gradient and then feeding that on top. Then we're getting our second highlight here. Then here I used a contrast luminosity color node, and I turn up the contrast a little bit because if we turn this off, it's kind of like washed out a little bit. So I want to bring some of the contrast, some of the color back. Then we paint our scratches here. You can see there. And it's usually, scratches are usually brighter because, you know, you have weather sitting on top of the bricks, dirt, rain, dust, all that stuff. So usually the outside darker, and then when you like break a piece off of it, it reveals the color, which is usually brighter because it hasn't been exposed to the elements and stuff. So for the color there, we just take the ongoing connection into an HSL and we just make it a little bit brighter. And then we do, we need the opacity, which is just our masks from our large scratches and our small scratches. And then max lighten together. And then here I Did I do anything with this? No, this is just the default levels. And then just feed that into the opacity, and then we have our scratches. Where's a good set? This one right there. Which also helps them, you know, show up more in the, because the height doesn't do it enough justice. So you just help accentuate them. Now, that's the end of the brick. Now we're going to move on to the mortar color. So we're going to use our mortar mask here, which is coming from the top height blend. Use that one a lot. Where are we? Right here. So that goes into your opacity. Then we take our moisture noise 1. We increase the tiling. We do a little sharpen on it because it's our mortar. Then we do gradient map. Then we do an HSL, but this one I didn't change anything, so I think I ended up going back on my decision on that. And then feed that into the foreground, and then we have our base mortar here. Okay. Then we have our secondary mortar color. So again, I used this reference the most. So that first layer of mortar we did is like these dark spots. And then you can see that around it, there's like a brighter version of itself, basically. So that brighter layer is supposed to be this. So that's why this one's looking a little darker and then this one's a little brighter. And I think provides some good breakup. Okay, so did we do this already? Yeah, we did. Okay, so we did the top part. Yeah, this is where we did the thing and the other thing. Wait, did I? No, I don't think I did. Well, just in case. So moisture noise. Increase the tiling, and I rotated it because I think I did the same thing over here. So yeah, so this one is not rotated, and then here I did rotate it. Okay, so yeah, we didn't do this one yet. Gradient map. HSL. Just lower the saturation a little bit because in the reference it looks kind of, you know, washed out. And then I changed the hue into more like a yellow greenish area. And then for the mask, we take our mortar mask. I blur it a little bit because I want the mortar color to kind of creep in on the brick. That was hard to say. So if we look here, if we didn't have this, this is where the mask is for the mortar. But if I blend it, it kind of creeps onto the brick, which is good because it's a good way to kind of blend the mortar into the brick a little bit. And we do this more drastically a little later, or I think it might be the next step. But you want to kind of ground them together because they've been together for many years. So you would expect that some of the coloring would kind of blend in together. And in some areas, not so much. So I do break it up a little bit. So we take our mortar mask, we blur it, and then I do a slope blur just to have that. Like for example, if we go over here again, see like over here you can kind of see the color change happening between the mortar and the brick. But then in other spots like right here, it's pretty clear where the brick ends and where the mortar starts. So in order to break up the uniformity of the blur, I use a slope blur so that in some areas it's more than others. We take out clouds 2. And then we do the slope blur, and I do min so that it cuts inward. I think maybe this also works. Yeah, you can see it's like cutting in, but I think I wanted to keep it to min. And then right now it's pretty uniform color-wise, so obviously I want to break it up. So take a moisture noise. We increase the tiling. multiply. See, so now like in some areas like here, we don't have any of that masking. So I don't want it to be completely uniform, otherwise it would just look like we did another layer of mortar on top of the mortar. And then we lose all our detail from before. So then there you go. Then we got this. Then we do our tertiary mortar color. Now this is where we really bring in a different, brighter color on top. Just to really sell that distinction between brick and mortar. Now for this guy, we take our mortar mask. Then we do a non-uniform blur grayscale. And then we invert it. And the idea here with the non-uniform blur is that I want there to be a gradient distinction between like the solid part of the mortar versus the areas that kind of blend into the brick. So using this is a good way to do that. You can see that there's a gradient on the edges. And then here, how do I explain this? I need to get rid of the bricks. Because this is only for the mortar. So I need to get rid of the bricks. So I take the original mortar mask, and I basically multiply that. But before I multiply it, I blur it so that it's not a clear cutoff between the brick and the mortar. So if we see, because look, if I disable this, then it makes everything that color. That's what we have to get rid of the bricks. But then I blur it, and if I unblur it, you can see if you get really close, which obviously probably wouldn't, the player or whoever is viewing this probably wouldn't see this close, but if I turn this off, you can see it's a clear distinction in pixels where one ends and the other one starts. So I blur it a little bit so that it's softer. And then you don't get this like, pixels pulling. And obviously this is also because of the vertice count on the material here. So if we were to go to like 1, it looks really noticeable. But then if we go back to like 6, you get more detail. But anyways, so yeah, we multiply that. So we got rid of the bricks. Then I do a histogram scan because I want to isolate the in-between and just kind of focus on the edges. Then we break that up a bit. So we do a max lighten here. We take a noise Perlin 32 scale. We increase the tiling, so it's technically 64. We slope blur it with the original guy up here. Very low intensity, set to blur. And then again, I need to get this, since this mode is blur, that means it's spilling in both directions, into itself and outward. Therefore, it's spilling into the brick. So I need to make sure that I bring this mask back. And I get rid of some of it. Get rid of the brick, I mean. See, because otherwise you get this. And honestly, I probably want to use this guy again. Yeah, so that is a softer transition. I guess that would be better. So it should look like that. Sorry about that. This is going to look better than the one I posted on my ArtStation. Alright, so we covered that. We've removed the bricks. Then we do a max lighten. And then here I want to have some areas that are way more concentrated than others. So like I really want whatever I'm blending into the foreground to be almost like 100% opacity in some areas. So if we... It's kind of hard to tell, it's just like white on white. But like here, everything's kind of like a gradient. And then I want some areas where it's just kind of like harsh, like a harsh change. So you can see the difference here. So we take this version and we scan it so that we isolate some of it. And then we use that result to max lighten on top. It's kind of hard to tell when you're looking at it from this far away, but like I said, it's all about the subtle, small differences. Yeah, so then here I want to grab some of the high points, so I think I use an AO. Yeah, so I use the ambient occlusion for the mortar. And then I scan it. Then I blur it a little bit. And then I scan it again. So this is what I want here. So I want the highest points of the mortar to kind of have this color, and then the crevices to be the color that it was, so the darker. And then I blur it a little bit down here. And then I max lighten so that the blurred version is on top of this version. So then it's like high concentration here, and then a little bit of a fall off. Otherwise it would look like this, which is like too noticeable. So then by adding this little blurred version below it, it kind of like blends in and out. And then if we need to get rid of these guys because they're going to be on top. So if we were to hide this, you can see these little spots on all the bricks. And the reason why they're there is because we used an ambient occlusion here, which is just the mortar. So you can see these spots here are still there. So we got to get rid of it. So we use our mortar mask, all bricks. And the reason why I'm using this one and not this one is because this one, if we remove the bricks, like if we use missing bricks, well, yeah, then this thing would still be on those spots. Yeah. So if we didn't have this mask, I think these would still be there. Right? Yeah, okay. So if we look over here, you can see this like highlight here. If we were to turn this off. So I need to make sure I'm using this one so that the because there's a difference between the bricks always being there and then the spots where there are no bricks. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of that, but yeah, it has to be this guy. Alright, so I'm going to turn off missing bricks. Because this needs to be able to work for both versions, whether there's bricks there or bricks missing, basically. Then that goes into the max lighten. Well, let me turn this back on. Because the spots in between were a little too dark. So I use this to kind of bring some of that color in between back. Then here is where we kind of blend in the mortar and the bricks together more than what we've been doing here. So this is like subtle blending. But here we do it a little bit more noticeably. We take our mortar mask again. Same concept, we take the non-uniform blur. We invert it. Then I multiply with the mask again to get rid of the bricks. So then we're left with this. Then that goes into a max lighten. And then to get that bottom, the foreground for that, we take the mortar mask and we invert grayscale. Then that feeds into another non-uniform. Invert it. Histogram scan it. Now you can see here that we're actually going more inside the brick. And then I bring the invert here. And then we multiply it. So you can see the extents of the brick here are different than the extent of the inner of the brick here. Because I wanted to come into the on top of the brick. So then when we max lighten, it is the most noticeable where the mortar and the brick meet, and then on top of the brick, it blends in like with a gradient. Now this would look the same on all the bricks, so we got to break up the creep. So we take a slope blur grayscale, noise clouds 2 or clouds 2 noise. We increase the tiling. Feed that in there. We get this. And then I do a subtle blend of max lighten. Hopefully you guys didn't hear that, but I think you might have. Hopefully it wasn't too loud. So then I max lighten it by 0.25 with the previous result. Just to bring back the gradient where they meet. Then I histogram scan it. Then I blur it. And I have two different blurs. One's way more... one's stronger than the other. And then I max lighten them together, I assume? Yeah. And then I take that to the opacity. So this kind of this kind of brings them together. Because here, they look disconnected a little bit, right? And then this kind of brings them together, and you can see that the transition... And the transition is stronger in some areas more than others. Because like here, you don't really see much. But here, you see more of it. And also because it's stronger there. Then, this is for missing brick stuff. So let's turn on our missing bricks. So then here, where the bricks are missing, I wanted it to be brighter. If you wanted it to be darker, you can do multiply instead of add. So we take the mask bricks missing, isolate it. So it's the isolated missing bricks. So these guys. We blur it a little bit because again, I don't want it to be harsh. And then we take the main path here into itself. And then we change it to add linear to 0.4. And then that goes into missing bricks boolean here. Switch color. Missing bricks. And then if it's true, then it's going to do this. So that goes into true. And if it's false, it's just going to do this. Otherwise, if you have all your bricks there, but you don't have this boolean, then it's just going to paint them all as if they're missing, or the other way around. Let's turn that back on. Then we have our lichen. So that's it for the mortar. So now here we bring in our lichen. So to do that, we take our white noise. What did I call this? Anyways, same issue as earlier. So then we scan it, get the grainy look. Then we blur it a little bit. We do a gradient map. This one, you can also sample this as well. You don't always have to sample this. It might be easier to just sample this sometimes. Then we blur it again. Then we HSL and we make it a little bit darker. Then that goes into the foreground. We take our mask, our lichen mask, and then we scan it. So here, it's very gradient, very grayscale. So we want to tighten it up. Then we take our mask light down. Then we scan it. Then I blur it. And then I use that to kind of break it up a little bit. Now, the reason why I used this, and I could be totally wrong, I kind of just went off the very little that I know about lichen. Or actually, I think maybe I Googled it, but it seems like lichen is usually facing the sun or the light source, similar to, and I could be wrong, so laugh at me in the comments if I am. They want to face the sun, so I'm subtracting everything that's not facing the sun. So for example, the sun isn't really heading down here, so I'm taking this mask and I'm subtracting that area. So where there would be lichen down there is getting subtracted. So yeah, just a very subtle detail. Also, it gives us this nice gradient. So here it's pretty solid. So it kind of makes the lichen a little bit more believable. So like if we get really close over here and we remove this, then it kind of looks like that, which is like super solid. But then here we kind of get rid of it on the bottom a little bit. And also if we look over to here and I look, could just be shadowing, but it seems like on the underside is always a little darker, or I guess more of the brick color. So it's always stronger on this top side. So went off of that. Alright, so that gives us our base lichen color. And then here we add a little dusting on top. So if we look over here, okay, this should be doing something. Oh, I might be upside down. Yep. Because the dusting is only happening on top. So for example, over here, wait a second. We're almost done, by the way, guys. Okay, click there. Oh yeah, it's not doing anything. Why not? Oh yeah. Wait a second. Oh, it's because I didn't have this turned on. So yeah, so if we look over here, we do have a little bit of light dusting on top. Again, since this is a wall texture, you kind of wonder to be there's a difference between like the top of the bricks and like the bottom of the bricks. Otherwise, it's just gonna look like floor tiles or like floor cobblestone. So just to sell it, you would have dust and stuff collecting at the top of the bricks. So now this dusting is only here if it's not wet. So if it's wet, it gets rid of them. So you can see here, but we'll go over that in a second. Okay, so let's start up here. Moisture noise. Increase tiling. Non-uniform directional warp grayscale. And we take the final height mask. Then we feed that into this directional warp grayscale. Then gradient map. Then HSL. So here we make it a lot brighter. We saturate it more, and we go towards the red a little bit. Then feed that into the foreground. Then here we take our mask light up. We feed that into a multiply. Then we take our flood fill main. We do another flood fill to gradient. Now this is where we're determining the okay, so let me just explain the logic here. So this is giving us the light source coming from the top right, hitting this, and then projecting, and then like just like what we did with the lichen. But I don't want the dust to be on all of the brick. I want it to just be at the top of the brick. So I use this gradient, which I then tighten up a little bit so that it stays up here. So this is going to be our mask. So yeah, so then we have this. We changed the angle, the degrees here to 90 so that they're all facing from the top down, brightest on top. Then here I need to multiply or subtract depending on which way your mask is, so that we get rid of the brick that is not being shown. So we take our mortar mask and then we subtract. We want to subtract the white, and then that leaves us with this, or it leaves us with this. Then we scan, so then we tighten it up just the top of the bricks. Then we do a slope blur, set to max. Now you could do min as well, but I think that the problem is that when we do, so right now it's like within the bounds of the brick, but once we do max or min, we're gonna go past the brick, because now we're going into the mortar territory. But also, if we did min, then it would cut away from the top, and then you would have top of the brick that doesn't have dust, but then the dust would suddenly appear. So I went with max, and then I can just multiply it again by the mask, or subtract, to kind of get rid of that, while still maintaining a little bit of that slope blur down here. So you can see that the green is completely straight, which obviously we don't want. We want it to be a little bit of a difference. So we use that. We use the slope blur to kind of break it up. So like, probably need to increase the noise on that, maybe ×2. So if we did just see what it looks like, increase the tiling and then put that in there. You might have to like change the intensity to like maybe like 0.1. Oops, 0.1. So then you have more variety on the sloping. Probably like 0.05. Yeah, I think that might be better, multiplying the noise. Because I don't think it was enough of a difference. Okay. So then so then because we're spilling over outside the brick, we got to bring that back. So we subtract the mass, the mortar. Then we do a multiplication with this guy, because again, this is the direction. So then we multiply with that, and it gives us this. And then I do a min darken here with a black and white spots 2. And again, this is just so that our gradient isn't so gradiently gradient. So I just want to throw on some random spots to kind of break it up. So then that gives us our dusting on top. So if we have dusts, then I only want the dusting to be when it's not wet. And then if it is wet, then I don't want the dust. So when it's dusting, it's going to go into the false. So when it's not wet, and then if it is wet, then I don't want this. So we go around. All right. Next this is the drip. So if I zoom out here, just to show you the difference. Go to top to view, zoom out. Okay, so you can see that this is when it's dry or snowy or normal, and then when it's wet, you get this dripping stuff. And it starts at the bottom of the brick, and it falls on top of the brick. So it's very precise where it's located. So to do that, this is probably the last hardest thing, and then we're pretty much done. And the reason why it's difficult is because we have to account for missing bricks. Because my thinking here is that the drip effect is stronger where it's missing bricks because it doesn't have the brick to kind of get in the way. So I want those drips to reach further down than the drip happening on the bricks because it's got to come down and then kind of go over. So I want those to be smaller. So that's why this is looking a little, no, it's actually not that bad. But that's basically the logic here. All right. And then let me just look at this real quick. Okay, and the other logic is that there are 2 spawn points for the drip. The drip happens at the very top of the brick. So like right here, and it drips down. But it also starts at the bottom of the brick and it drips down. Because I would assume water would kind of, you know, run down the side and then like kind of come around and then start falling. So there's 2 spawn points and we have to account for missing or non-missing bricks. So that's basically what all of this is. So to get started, we'll work our way from top down as usual. Start with our final AO. And then we do a shadows node. This is what I mentioned earlier at the start. This is similar to the light, except this is just showing you where the shadows are. So if we did just a quick example, if we did a shape, and let's just turn down the scale, and then we'll do a shadows. Then depending, so if you look at the light angle, the sun or the light source or the directional light is coming from the top, from up here, and it's shining down towards the bottom right. So that's why the shadows are casting bottom right. And then if you change the angle of the light source, it'll change where the shadows are. So again, because everything's dripping downward, we want to make sure that our shadow is being casted towards the bottom. So we go 90 degrees up, and now we get a gradient under our bricks, or in this case under this cube or square. And then you can increase, like, you know, the samples or the quality, the edge softness, and then the shadow distance or drip distance. So that's how I use shadows for that. So that's basically just like the concept. So we take our final AO, and then you can see here I tweak the shadows, and then I invert it so that I can work with the white. And then that feeds into a max lighten, and then just hold that there, and then we're going to work on this bottom stuff here. We take our flood fill main, and then we do again a flood fill gradient, and we have the white at the top, black at the bottom. So 90 degrees. Everything else can stay the same. And then we take our mortar mask, and I inverted it because I'm a noob. Then I multiplied, or I can just take the original and then subtract. Depends again on which way your mask is, but it's fine. And then once we have that, so we have a gradient for all the bricks. And then here we get rid of the mortar. So where there are no bricks, it's being taken out. So then we have our histogram scan, same thing to the dusting that we did. We're determining how far down we want the drips to fall. And then now here we do a separate one for the missing bricks. So you can see that the missing bricks reach further down. So for that, we take our mask bricks missing, isolate it. So these are the missing bricks. We flood fill, and we do another flood filter gradient for those guys. And then I subtract, right? Yeah, subtract the mortar mask with all the bricks, because I want to get the whole shape. Then we scan it a little bit. And then those two get mixed with a max lighten. So then we have our missing brick drip distance and then our brick distance here. And then we have our boolean here for missing bricks. So if it's missing bricks, then you're going to need this one because this one has the missing brick drip lengths. And then this one doesn't use them. Then once that is done, we're going to go into actually, let me check something real quick. Let me turn this off. Okay, yeah, all the bricks are there. Okay, no, that's good. So I'm going to undo turning off missing bricks and turning it back on. All right. So then here we have max lighten. And basically what we're max lightning now is this drippy effect. We're going to take our mortar mask and then invert it. And then multiply with our random grayscale distanced version. So this guy. And then we're going to create a shadows. Now the reason why I did this is because I don't want the drip effect to be as strong for all the bricks or the same strength. Hold on, a little stretch. Okay. I want some of the drips under the bricks to have varying strengths. So that's why some are higher than others. So it's like if we did a tile generator, change it to square, lower the scale a little bit, and let's change this to 6x6. And then we did shadows again. Increase the distance. And let's go with 270. All right, so the shadows are all facing downward and they're all at the same strength. So if we were to go into our tile generator again and scroll down and then change the luminance random, where it sinks some into the ground and some stay up. Now we have different degrees of shadows because they're closer to the surface and some are further up, so they're casting a stronger shadow. So that's what I do here. By giving the bricks different sizes here, my shadows can be different and they're not all the same strength. Now it's very subtle. I don't want it to be one to become kind of faint and one to be super strong. So then we invert it. So now we have our drippy stuff, our drippy drip. Then we max lighten these together. Now these can probably look like that. This shouldn't matter if we're doing max lighten. So now we're mixing both our gradient shapes. So we have our, this is the gradient on the bricks, and then this is the gradient under the bricks, right? So it's on the mortar. So then we blend them together with a max lighten. And then here I want to break up the what's it called? The drip. Now this is the lazy way to do it. If you wanted to be more detailed, you would do this before you blend them together, and then you would have to use the mortar mask to cut out where it starts and where it begins, because now we're blending it from this brick up to the mortar, which I didn't really want, but I didn't want to make this super complicated for a detail that would barely be noticeable. But if you were doing 4K out the wazooey type of render, then you probably want to take the time, and it's not that hard. But we got a little lazy here. So we take our noise Perlin 32 scale, we increase the tiling, and then we slope blur it. Because like if you look here, this is kind of dripping upward, which we didn't want, but it's okay. Okay, so then now that we have kind of our drip masks, now we can add our noise that makes it look more like drip. So we have Grunge Map 002, which kind of has that drippy effect. And then here I inverted it because I like the invert better. and then multiply that with our gradients. So then we get that. So here you can see it's pretty uniform across all of them. So then we got to break it up a little bit. Then I histogram scan it to have more contrast. Because here they all kind of blend together in terms of like strength. So here I wanted to have more of a stronger fall off. So we scan it. And then you can see here, it's like almost pretty solidly white. So I want to break it up a little bit. Throw on a moisture noise 2. Min darken. And then I take this grunge leaky paint. So throw on another grunge like and I auto level just in case it's not using the full range. Soft light it on top. Don't ask me how I chose that. Sometimes I don't know what the what these like bottom 5 do as much. I know screen, but sometimes I'll just start a copy and I'll just cycle. It's not the best thing to do. You should know what they all do, but I'm getting there. Okay, wait, where were we? Okay, yeah, here, soft light. And then I'll play with the opacity. If I find something that I kind of like, I'll leave it there and then I'll play with the opacity. Or I might do opacity 0.5 and then cycle through them again, but these days I'm getting a little better. But anyways, auto levels. And then here we have a multiply. And what are we doing here? Okay, again, playing around with the intensity of the strength levels. So here it's pretty much the same again. And then here we break it up a little bit. You can see these guys are less strong than like, let's say these guys here. So we take our mortar mask, invert it, because I'm a noob, into a multiply. And then we're multiplying with this random grayscale. Now for this case, I do want to have the in-between stay one color. But I lose it because I'm doing a range, but I get it back up here when I do the multiply. And then we take the mortar mask again, and then we add it. Because I want the in-between to be white this time. Otherwise, if it was black, then we would lose the in-between. It would look like that. Which is not what we want. And then that feeds into the opacity. And then we're going to make a portal called mask drip, because we use this for roughness later in the next tutorial, or the next part. And then we need to do the color. So for that, I start from this Grunge Map 02 into a gradient color. And this one's pretty simple. I can probably even click the markers for you guys. So this one's at position 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. You can copy this value here, or just the numbers. And then there's the next one, the next one, and the next one. And you can look at the positions here to see where they are perfectly placed. Or you can just run your gradient across, but it's not too complicated. Just the degrees of green jumping around from dark to bright. And then here I kind of brighten it a little bit because I thought it was getting a little too dark. Unrealistically dark. And I want some of that like dark, mushy green to pop through. And then here we have our wet boolean. And it's going to turn it off because wet is turned off right now. So I'll turn it on. So if it's wet, then give us the drip. If it's not wet, don't do the drip. Pretty simple. And then this is obviously using the wet boolean again. And then I threw this together the last minute because I accidentally ran across this. I was playing around with some colors and I was like, oh, that looks like snow. So I kind of kept it. It's not the best snow, but from far away, if you squint your eyes in the dark, it kind of passes. So let me just show you what that looks like. Now you can have wet and snow together, because snow just kind of sits on top. So you can keep your drips while keeping your snow, but I'm going to turn off the wet so that we can see the snow better. So I'm gonna turn this on, and then I'm gonna turn the snow boolean on here. Now this looks best when we use the rounded cube. So let's go here. Look at it from straight and then move this light source around. So no snow, snow. So what happens here? No, I'm realizing I should have put the sharpen before the snow. That's okay. Okay, so after the wet, we're just going to add a uniform color, and I downscaled it to -7 by -7 because it doesn't need to be a 2K or 4K texture, so it's just a 16 by 16 because it's just a uniform color. I explained that in the many other videos before. So then we'll take our mask light up, and then just plug that into the opacity, and that's it. Okay, and it looks like snow. So, and then I do have a snow mask, because later on with the roughness, I do give it a little twinkle in the roughness, so that when you look at it from different angles, it kind of sparkles to kind of represent snow a little better, even though it's probably not that realistic. But just do a copy, and we have these two, and then if it's snow, it goes in true, and if it's not snow, it goes into false, and then we made a new boolean for snow here. I think this is the first time we use the snow boolean. Now, like I said, this sharpen should probably be here because I wanted to sharpen the rock, but not the snow. Well, actually, it should go here. But you guys can do it. Just move this here. You know what? Actually, we'll do it when we get to it. Okay, so now we're adding our highlights, just our overall highlights, and it helps our texture pop. So if we look over here, just accentuates our overall look, makes the crevices look darker and the most out-facing spots brighter. So we'll take our normal height end, curvature Sobel, or Sobel, or Sobelly. Transform it into a color by using a default gradient map, feeding that on there. Overlay 0.2. And you can play around with the intensity of this if you like. That's just too much. We want the contrast to be subtle. And then here we have our sharpen. And like I said, I probably don't want this on the snow. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna leave it, but I'm gonna turn it off, and I'm gonna copy and paste it over here. And turn this one on. And then just look at the difference real quick. I'm gonna look where the snow is more noticeable, so like up here. Yeah, because I want the snow to be a little bit blurry. I don't want to sharpen the snow. So yeah, I'm going to turn that off. Sorry, I hope you guys didn't hear that. I'm going to fix that for the next part. Then we're going to disable that and plug that in there. And then I'm just going to, just so that my graph is looking nice and neat, just going to move everything down. And then just I get annoyed with this. Boom. All right. And then once we have our highlight color, I have an HSL here where I kind of just brighten everything up a little bit just by 0.0125. Just a little bit. Now, this is where we do color correction. Basically, what I mean by that is, if you guys remember this guy that I spent like 3 hours talking about, So like over here, it's telling me that there's some pixels that might be too dark or too bright. So if we look at our base color, I like to zoom in on the pixels, and then I click on the base color, and then it tells you which pixels they are. So it's obviously telling us that it's too bright. Now for something like this, it might be okay because it's super tiny detail, but we're gonna fix it anyways. And the way we fix that is by isolating. Oh my goodness. By isolating those pixels. So to do that is from the HSL, we do a grayscale conversion, and then it turns our color into a grayscale. Now we do two corrections. We do a black color and a white color. So the dark pixels and the bright pixels. So we're going to start with the black first. Grayscale conversion. And then I invert it. And then I do a scan of 1.25. And I turn the contrast up to 0.75. Now, depending on, how many pixels are off, you're going to have to play with the scan, but we're using the scan to kind of pinpoint based on the bright values here. And that's why I inverted it. Because all this does is just takes the darkest pixel, turns them black, and the bright pixels turns them white. And you know how every color has like this value here, the V, which makes it brighter or darker. So I think when it converts it, it just looks at whatever that pixel is. So if we look at this brown here, it's got a value of 0.4392157. So if we turn the saturation down, that's the equivalent of the grayscale of that brown. So then I think that pixel, whatever one I selected, it just turns into that here. So it just loses its saturation and its hue. Okay, so then we scan and we get the dark pixels. And then what I do is, well, first of all, let's find them. No, that's the snow one, I think, right? Yeah, so we need to find the dark ones. So I'm going to turn on the white so that it fixes, so we don't see those red ones, and then any red ones that we see will be from dark ones. Okay, so let's look over here. So yeah, these are pretty dark, right? You can see them there. They're pretty dark. So now if we turn this on, you can see that they're becoming brighter. And now over here, they're gone. It's not perfectly gone, but it does an okay job. And you can also you don't have to, this isn't the only way to correct it, but when it's only a few pixels, this is how I've learned to do it. You can also just go back over here and just make overall, like, the bricks brighter, and that should also fix it, but you're working with, like, macro. You're changing all of the brick colors, which can be a little bit more difficult to pinpoint certain pixels because we're working with gradients. Unless you're working with uniform colors, then it'd be so much easier to just brighten them or darken them. But basically what I did is I found the pixels this way, and then I took the main path here, and I did another HSL, and I just turned the saturation down a little bit to 0.25. And then I just made those pixels, or I just made everything brighter. And then plug that into the foreground, and then it's using this as a mask. So it fixes the issue. Now again, when it's this bad, it's probably okay because it's so tiny. But if you start getting like big chunks, then obviously you want to see what the issue is. So now we have to fix the white ones. So for that is I don't invert it. I leave it to the original, and then I use a scan again to isolate those pixels. And then I do the same thing. I take the main path because I gotta account for these guys as well. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I should just go from here again. No, No, it's fine that I do it from here, actually. So then here I make it darker, because now we're fighting the white. We're fixing the white ones, so I call it white color correction. I just make it a little bit darker, and then I scan my pixels that are too bright. So let's say these guys over here. So like this guy, and these three guys here. So boom, boom, boom. Or this guy, and this guy. And then we just darken them a little bit by taking the main thing and just darkening it. And then we're pinpointing those pixels only. And then we're making sure that our albedo is within the acceptable range or threshold of 30 plus, 30 minus, or however you want to conceptualize that. And now we're looking pretty green. Oh, except for that guy. It's kind of orange, but that's okay. It's only 1 pixel. No one's going to notice. Okay, so we went from boom. Let me go back to nice plane. To this. And let's turn off our snow. Get our default look. And then we did wet with missing bricks. And if we turn off missing bricks, then it'll adjust itself. And now we have the drip on there as well. And I think that is it for base color. Next will be roughness. That one is super short. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy. The most difficult thing is just, you know, doing the whether it's wet or not differences. But yeah. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.